On Christmas morning, my son looked me in the eyes and said, "There are no gifts for you this year. You are just a guest here." His wife Tanya sat beside him on the couch with a satisfied smile on her face, while my two grandchildren tore through wrapping paper on the floor. And I stood there in the doorway, wearing my nicest holiday sweater, the one with little snowflakes I had bought specifically for this day, realizing that the family I had sacrificed everything for now saw me as nothing more than a visitor in the home I still owned. But here is the thing about calling someone a guest in their own property. You better make sure the deed is not still in their name. So I smiled, reached into my purse, and pulled out a red envelope I had been saving for weeks. When Tanya ripped it open and unfolded the papers inside, my son Derek read the bottom line aloud in a trembling voice. All belongings left behind after the eviction date will be considered abandoned and disposed of accordingly. Subscribe for more stories and tell me in comments, where are you watching from? My name is Francine, and I am 55 years old. I spent 31 years of my life working as a registered nurse at a hospital in Milwaukee. Long shifts that stretched through the night. Difficult patients who sometimes cursed at me when the pain got too bad. Holidays spent on my feet in fluorescent lit hallways instead of at home with my family. But I never complained about any of it, because every single paycheck went toward building a better life for my son Derek. I raised Derek completely on my own after his father walked out when the boy was only 3 years old. His father moved to California, started a brand new family with another woman, and forgot we ever existed. There were no child support checks, no birthday cards, no phone calls on holidays. Just me, working double shifts and doing everything in my power to make sure Derek never felt like he was missing anything important. When Derek was 12, I finally saved enough money to buy a small 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. It was nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, and a little backyard with an old maple tree that turned gold every autumn. But it was ours. I remember the day we moved in, standing on the front porch with Derek beside me, telling him that one day this house would belong to him. I told him I was building something he could inherit and pass on to his own children someday. Derek grew up to be a handsome and charming young man. He went to college on a partial scholarship and earned a degree in business. He got a good job at a marketing firm downtown and started making decent money. When he was 26, he met a woman named Tanya at a networking event. She was confident and polished, with perfectly styled hair and expensive taste in everything from shoes to handbags. Derek fell for her fast and hard. They got engaged after 8 months and married within the year. I liked Tanya at first. She seemed driven and ambitious in a way that I thought would push Derek to succeed. But after the wedding, I started noticing small things that made me uncomfortable. She never thanked me for gifts, no matter how much thought I put into them. She made comments about the size of my house and how outdated the furniture looked. Once, right in front of me at a family dinner, she asked Derek why I had not upgraded to a nicer neighborhood if I had been working for so many years. Derek just laughed nervously and changed the subject. When Derek and Tanya had their first child, a beautiful little girl they named Posey, I offered to let them move into my house so they could save money. They were renting a cramped 1-bedroom apartment at the time, and Tanya was about to go on maternity leave. The offer made sense. They could live rent-free, build up their savings, and eventually buy a place of their own. They accepted immediately. 2 years later, they had a second child, a sweet little boy named Arlo. The house was full again for the first time in years. I could hear laughter echoing through the hallways and tiny footsteps running across the floor above my head. I thought we had finally become the family I had always dreamed of having. I gave up the master bedroom so Derek and Tanya could have more space. I moved into the smaller guest room at the end of the hall, the one with the window overlooking the backyard. I told myself it was only temporary. I told myself I was just making room for the growing family. I did not mind the sacrifice because I loved being close to my grandchildren. I loved waking up to Posey's giggles and reading bedtime stories to Arlo every night. But I did not realize that by giving up my room, I was also giving up my place in the family. And by the time I understood what was happening, it was almost too late to take it back. The changes happened so gradually that I almost did not notice them at first. Small things that seemed harmless on their own, but added up to something much bigger over time. A comment here, a cold look there, a door closing a little too quickly when I walked down the hallway. Tanya started redecorating the house without asking me. One afternoon, I came home from grocery shopping and found that the curtains in the living room had been replaced. The soft yellow ones I had picked out 15 years ago were gone, thrown into a garbage bag by the front door. In their place hung sleek gray panels that made the room feel cold and unfamiliar. "I hope you do not mind," Tanya said when she saw me staring. "Those old ones were so dated. This looks much better, do you not think?" I wanted to say that I did mind. I wanted to tell her that those curtains had been a gift from a friend who had passed away, but I just nodded and said they looked nice. Over the next few months, more things disappeared. The wooden clock my late mother had given me was moved to the basement. The family photos on the mantel were replaced with modern art prints Tanya had ordered online. The floral wallpaper in the hallway was painted over with the same flat gray color that now seemed to cover every surface in the house. Each time I mentioned that I wished she had asked me first, Tanya gave me the same tight smile and the same response. "We live here too, Francine. We have to make it feel like home." But it did not feel like home anymore. It felt like I was living in someone else's house, watching pieces of my life get erased one by one. The comments about me started around the same time. Tanya would sigh loudly whenever I walked into the kitchen while she was cooking. She would roll her eyes when I asked what was for dinner. She told Derek once, loud enough for me to hear, that I was always underfoot, and they never had any privacy. Derek never said anything to defend me. He would just mumble something vague and leave the room. I started spending more time in my small bedroom at the end of the hall. I would close the door and sit on my bed, listening to the sounds of the family on the other side of the wall. I could hear Posey laughing. I could hear Arlo running up and down the stairs. I could hear Derek and Tanya talking in low voices, and sometimes I could hear my name. They stopped including me in family activities. They would take the kids to the park on Saturday mornings without telling me. They would go out to restaurants for dinner and not invite me along. They planned a trip to the zoo one weekend, and I only found out about it when I saw the photos on Tanya's phone. One evening, I offered to babysit so Derek and Tanya could have a date night. I thought it would be a nice gesture, a way to remind them that I was still part of the family. Tanya barely looked up from her phone. "We already have a sitter lined up, a professional, but thanks anyway." I stood there for a moment, not knowing what to say. Then I went back to my room and closed the door. The worst moment came a few weeks before Christmas. I was in my bedroom reading a book when I heard Tanya's voice in the hallway. She was on the phone with someone, her sister, I think, and she was not trying to be quiet. "I do not understand why she is still here," Tanya said. "She does not pay rent. She does not help with bills. We are basically supporting her at this point. I told Derek we need to start treating her like what she is, a guest." I set my book down slowly. My hands were trembling. Honestly, I wish she would just move into a senior home or something, Tanya continued. This is supposed to be our house, our life. I did not sign up to live with my mother-in-law forever. I waited for Derek to come home that night. I sat in the living room, hoping he would bring it up, hoping he would tell me what Tanya had said and apologize, hoping he would remind me that I was still his mother and that this was still my home. But he walked right past me without saying a word. He went upstairs to their bedroom and closed the door. I sat alone in the dark for a long time that night, staring at the Christmas tree they had decorated without me. The lights twinkled softly, reflecting off the ornaments I did not recognize. None of my old decorations were on the tree. Not the glass angel my mother had given me. Not the handmade star Derek had made in kindergarten. Just shiny new ornaments that Tanya had ordered from some catalog. And that was the moment I realized the truth. I was not part of this family anymore. I was just someone they tolerated, someone they were waiting to get rid of. Christmas Eve arrived with a thin layer of snow covering the front yard. The house looked beautiful from the outside with white lights wrapped around the porch railing and a wreath hanging on the front door. Inside, the tree sparkled in the living room, surrounded by dozens of presents in shiny wrapping paper. Anyone passing by would have thought this was the home of a happy, loving family. I had spent weeks shopping for gifts. I picked out a silk scarf for Tanya in her favorite shade of burgundy. I bought Derek a new watch because his old one had stopped working months ago. For Posey, I found a set of watercolor paints and a sketchbook because she loved drawing. For Arlo, I chose a wooden train set that reminded me of the one Derek had played with as a child. I wrapped each gift carefully, writing their names on little tags in my best handwriting, and placed them under the tree, alongside all the others. That evening, after the children went to bed, I was sitting alone in the kitchen drinking a cup of tea. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards upstairs. I was thinking about Christmas mornings from years ago, when Derek was small and would wake me up before sunrise, bouncing on my bed and begging to open presents. Then I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Derek appeared in the doorway, his hands shoved into the pockets of his sweatpants. He looked uncomfortable, like he had something to say but did not know how to start. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. I set down my cup and waited. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Tanya and I discussed it, and we think it would be best if Christmas morning is just for the four of us this year. You know, parents and kids. A private family moment." I stared at him, trying to understand what he was saying. "What do you mean, just the four of you?" "I live here, Derek. I am your mother." He avoided my eyes. "I know, but Tanya thinks it would be easier if you stayed in your room until we finish opening presents. You can come out for breakfast afterward. We just want some time alone as a family." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I sat there in silence, feeling something crack open inside me. After everything I had done, after all the years I had spent raising him alone, working myself to exhaustion, giving up my bedroom so his family could be comfortable. And now he was asking me to hide in my room on Christmas morning like I did not belong. "Derek, I bought presents for everyone," I said quietly. "I am part of this family." He finally looked at me, but his expression was distant, almost annoyed. "You can give your gifts later, Mom. This is what Tanya wants. I am just trying to keep the peace." I wanted to argue. I wanted to remind him of every sacrifice I had made, every double shift, every birthday party I had thrown for him, every time I had put his needs before my own. But I could see in his eyes that none of it mattered to him anymore. He had made his choice, and it was not me. "I understand," I said softly. He nodded once, looking relieved that I had not made a scene. Then he turned and walked back upstairs without another word. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my small bed in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the window. I thought about the house I had bought with my own money, the house I had invited them to live in, the house where I had raised my son and dreamed of growing old surrounded by family. And now I was being told to stay hidden on the most important morning of the year. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, something inside me had shifted. The hurt was still there, deep and heavy, but underneath it was something harder, something that had been building for months and was finally ready to break through. I got out of bed and opened my closet. On the top shelf, behind a stack of old sweaters, was a red envelope I had prepared 3 weeks earlier. Inside were the eviction papers my lawyer had drafted after I overheard Tanya's phone call. I had hoped I would never have to use them. I had told myself I was being paranoid. But now, standing alone in the cold morning light, I knew exactly what I had to do. I got dressed slowly and carefully. I put on my holiday sweater with the little snowflakes. I brushed my hair and looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. Then I picked up the red envelope and tucked it into my purse. Today, they would learn the truth. This was not their house. It never had been. And I was done pretending to be invisible. I waited in my room until I heard them all awake and moving around downstairs. The sound of Posey's excited squealing drifted through the closed door. Arlo was laughing about something, his little voice high and happy. I could hear wrapping paper being torn and crumpled, followed by gasps of delight. The sounds of a family enjoying Christmas morning together. A family that had decided I was not part of it. I sat on the edge of my bed with my purse in my lap, the red envelope tucked safely inside. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. I had spent the whole night preparing myself for this moment, and now that it was here, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not happiness, not anger, just a quiet certainty that I was doing the right thing. I waited until the noise died down. When the laughter faded and the sounds of tearing paper stopped, I knew they had finished opening their presents. I stood up, smoothed my sweater, and walked out of my room. The living room was a mess of wrapping paper and ribbon. Posey sat on the floor, surrounded by new toys, her face glowing with excitement. Arlo was pushing a shiny red fire truck across the carpet, making siren noises with his mouth. Derek sat on the couch with a cup of coffee, looking relaxed and content. Tanya was beside him, scrolling through her phone with a satisfied smile. They all looked up when I entered the room. Tanya's smile flickered for just a moment before settling back into place. "Oh, you are awake," she said. "We just finished. There is coffee in the kitchen if you want some." I did not move toward the kitchen. I stood in the doorway, looking at the scene in front of me. The tree, the presents, the children, the son I had raised alone for over 2 decades, and the woman who had convinced him I no longer mattered. "There are no gifts for you this year," Tanya added, her voice light and casual. "We decided to keep things simple. Besides, you are just a guest here. Guests do not usually get presents." Derek did not say anything. He just stared at his coffee cup like he had not heard a word. I smiled. It was a small, calm smile that seemed to catch Tanya off guard. "Actually," I said, "I do have one more gift to give, for both of you." I reached into my purse and pulled out the red envelope. I walked across the room slowly, stepping carefully around the scattered toys and crumpled paper, and handed it to Tanya. She looked at the envelope with suspicion. "What is this?" "Open it and see." She glanced at Derek, who shrugged. Then she tore the envelope open and pulled out the folded papers inside. Her eyes moved quickly across the first page. I watched her face go pale. Derek leaned over to look. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Read it out loud," I said quietly, the last line at the bottom. Derek's hands were trembling as he took the papers from Tanya. His voice came out unsteady, almost a whisper. All belongings left behind after the eviction date will be considered abandoned and disposed of accordingly. The room went completely silent. Even the children stopped playing and looked up, sensing that something had changed. Tanya's voice came out shrill and tight. "This is a joke. You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious," I replied. "You have 60 days to vacate the property. My lawyer drafted the papers 3 weeks ago. Everything is legal and binding." Derek stood up from the couch, his face red with shock. "Mom, what are you doing? You cannot throw us out. This is insane. We have kids." I looked at my son for a long moment. I searched his face for any trace of the boy I had raised. The boy who used to make me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day. The boy who cried when I dropped him off at college and told me he would never forget everything I had done for him. But that boy was gone. In his place was a man who had just told me to hide in my room on Christmas morning. "You called me a guest in my own home," I said calmly. "You told me there were no gifts for me because I do not belong here. But you forgot something, Derek. This house is mine. My name is on the deed. I bought it with my own money, working double shifts while raising you alone, and I will not spend another day being treated like a stranger in the home I built." Tanya opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. "This conversation is over. You have the papers. You know the date. I suggest you start packing." Then I turned around and walked back to my room, closing the door softly behind me. The weeks that followed Christmas were tense and uncomfortable. Derek and Tanya barely spoke to me. When we passed each other in the hallway, they looked through me like I was made of glass. Tanya spent most of her time on the phone with her mother, speaking in hushed, angry tones. Derek walked around the house with his jaw clenched, avoiding eye contact whenever I entered a room. They tried to fight the eviction at first. Tanya hired a lawyer who sent my attorney a letter claiming they had established residency and could not be forced to leave. My lawyer responded with a copy of the deed, which clearly showed my name as the sole owner. He also included documentation proving that Derek and Tanya had never paid rent, had never signed a formal lease, and had no legal claim to the property. Their lawyer stopped responding after that. 5 weeks after Christmas, they moved out. I watched from the kitchen window as they loaded boxes into a rental truck. Tanya directed the movers with sharp gestures, never once looking toward the house. Derek carried Arlo on his hip, while Posey held onto his other hand, her little face confused and sad. I wanted to run outside and hug my grandchildren. I wanted to tell them that none of this was their fault and that I loved them more than anything. But I stayed inside. I knew that any attempt to approach them would only make things worse. The truck pulled away around noon. I stood at the window until it disappeared around the corner. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and cried for the first time since this whole ordeal began. The house felt enormous after they left. Every room echoed with emptiness. I walked through the hallways, touching the walls, trying to remember what it felt like before everything went wrong. The gray paint Tanya had chosen looked harsh in the winter light. The modern furniture she had picked out felt cold and impersonal. I spent the first week slowly putting my home back together. I rehung the old curtains I had rescued from the basement. I brought my mother's wooden clock back upstairs. I found the box of family photos Tanya had stored away and placed them back on the mantel where they belonged. Derek did not speak to me for 4 months. No call, no text, no visits. I heard through a mutual friend that they had rented an apartment across town and that Tanya was furious about the whole situation. She blamed me for everything. She told people I was a vindictive old woman who had turned on her own family. I did not try to defend myself. I knew the truth, and that was enough. Then one afternoon in late April, my phone rang. It was Derek. His voice sounded tired and uncertain. "Mom, can we talk?" I told him yes. He came over the next day, alone. We sat on the back porch under the maple tree, the same spot where I used to push him on a tire swing when he was small. For a long time, neither of us said anything. We just watched the leaves rustle in the breeze. Finally, Derek spoke. "Tanya and I are getting a divorce." I did not say anything. I just waited for him to continue. He told me that things had been falling apart between them for months. The stress of the move had made everything worse. They fought constantly. She blamed him for not standing up to me. He blamed her for pushing him to choose sides. Eventually, she decided she was done and filed the papers herself. "I am not telling you this because I want sympathy," Derek said quietly. "I am telling you because I owe you an apology. I should have stood up for you. I should have told Tanya that treating you like a stranger was wrong, but I was a coward. I wanted to avoid conflict, so I just went along with whatever she wanted, and I lost you because of it." I reached over and took his hand. It was the first time I had touched my son in months. "You did not lose me," I said. "I am still here. We are rebuilding now, slowly, carefully." Derek comes by on weekends to help with yard work and small repairs. Sometimes he brings the kids, and I bake cookies while Posey paints at the kitchen table, and Arlo runs around the backyard chasing birds. It is not the same as before. There is still a distance between us that will take time to close. But we are trying, and that is what matters. I am 55 years old, and I spent too many years believing that love meant accepting whatever treatment people gave me. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. I made myself small so others could feel big. But I learned something important that Christmas morning. You cannot love someone into respecting you, and you cannot build a family on a foundation where your own worth is invisible. This house is still mine. And so is my voice. If you want more stories, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from.